Maintenance is the largest line item in property management, and somehow it's still one of the least modernized. Work orders come in through text messages, emails, phone calls, and then they get routed through coordinators, vendors, and even spreadsheets. And somewhere in that process, things break. Maintenance and repairs make up over 33% of the property management market. That's not a side function. That's one of the biggest operating budgets in real estate. And yet, many teams are still running it like a call center. Today, we're joined by Will Parrish, co-founder and chief customer officer at Lula. Hi, Will. Where does this podcast find you?
Edward, I'm in Overland Park, Kansas. This is Lula's corporate headquarters, and looking forward to chatting today.
So before we dive into maintenance and so many exciting stuff that you're working on, tell us, why did you found Lula? How did that come to be?
Yeah, so Bo is our CEO, my business partner. We had been looking for different opportunities to work together for a number of years. He'd been involved in a number of different businesses. He's a serial entrepreneur. I had spent a lot of time in corporate America. And, we originally founded Lula as a B2C play to help homeowners instantly connect with fully vetted contractors. When he pitched the idea, it was really based on experience that he had moving into his first home with his wife. And, the AC went out almost immediately. And he did the things that everybody else did. You go on Google, you go to Angie's List, and it just was a really frustrating process for him. And I think I'm lucky that he's got such an entrepreneurial mindset that, he immediately thought of like, what could the solution look like? And so he approached me with the idea for what eventually became Lula. And I was, I think, just tired enough of corporate America at that point that I said, yeah, sure, let's do this thing that there's no blueprint for doing, that we can't just go out and copy another business. Like, it sounds crazy, but yeah, let's try it. And so we dove in together, and I guess, as they say, the rest is history at this point. So we're 9+ years in, and who would have known, but we have a real company here.
First, kudos for the bravery, the guts, and for trusting your partnership. I think that at the end of the day, it's not only what we do, but who we do it with. Deciding to build in the maintenance space of all problems, it certainly requires a solid foundational team to do that. And also kudos to you for leaving corporate America. Thomson Reuters, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was there almost 20 years. It was a great place to work, met a lot of great people, but I'm sure a lot of people share this feeling, but you just, the last 10 years or whatever that I was there, I just felt like I really want to do my own thing. I want to make my own decisions and have the responsibility for those decisions. And so, when the idea came and the time was right, I was nervous, of course, and a little hesitant, but was also happy to make the leap, just knowing that it'd be more fulfilling whether it worked out or not.
Usually the hesitation is supported by people around you, not necessarily by you in that case, I'm assuming.
And it's still all these years later, I'll run into somebody occasionally that's like, hey, how's that app thing working out? And it's like, well, and it was an app then, but you have to tell them like, yeah, it's a real company. We've got, an office and employees and all that. So
That's so
I'm glad
fun.
I did it, and super proud of where we're at today.
That's fascinating. Let's talk about maintenance. The problem, why it's still so archaic in many ways or so inefficient. I mean, like I said earlier, maintenance is a third of the property management business, and it still runs on text and spreadsheets. So why has it been so hard to modernize, to quote unquote fix?
I think when you look at the maintenance space, you can't necessarily solve maintenance problems without people that understand maintenance. But I also think historically, there's not a lot of people that have a deep understanding of maintenance that also understand like how to build and deploy meaningful technology. And so I think people kind of get stuck in this in between where they recognize like, even though maintenance isn't the most exciting part of the industry that we're in, it is actually really technical in nature, right? Like, you need somebody who understands what maintenance means at the work order level. But you also need somebody that understands operationally how to like deploy change and like I mentioned, how to build technology. And so it kind of tends to be like a low tech area of most businesses. It really, if you were to ask like how we ended up in this space, it's product market fit. We never started this company saying like, we want to solve SFR maintenance. In fact, I don't know that we were totally sure that SFR was a space back then or a specific industry, right? Like I said, we built a B2C app to help homeowners because that was the pain we were feeling. And after doing that business for about a year, me being a former senior sales leader in corporate America, I kind of hated the idea that we would invest money to bring on a homeowner and they had one home. I'm like, how can we get 10,000 homes? And that's when we started to get some product market pull from the SFR space, which is like, hey, we've got these decentralized assets. As you mentioned, we've got sort of these somewhat archaic systems to try to tackle this problem with maintenance. You guys have got this technology. Come over here and see if there's a solution that matches. And I think we've been really fortunate that it has matched, and we've been able to like iterate and continue to improve our product so that it is a solution that's meaningful, I think, in the SFR space.
And we will certainly jump into the solution and everything you're doing around AI. But before then, to your point, the term SFR only got popularized or entered the mainstream, just over 10 years ago, maybe less than 15 for sure. We're not in the early innings anymore, but we're, in terms of real estate cycles, we haven't had more than 1.5 cycles, or if you will.
Yeah.
So when maintenance operation breaks down, where does it usually happen in single family rentals? Is it in the intake of the order, the coordination of the solution, or the vendor execution?
Well, it can be in all three. I think it's probably a little bit of a loaded question, which I appreciate. But I think the front end of the work order is the most important, that intake process. And it's just because, I mean, you've seen what a work order looks like when it's submitted by a resident. There's no structure of any kind to it. Sometimes it doesn't even really describe the problem. It certainly isn't going to address the cause. It also might not be in great English or formatted in a way that's easy to digest what the problem is. And so a lot of folks are sort of forced to just accept that. If you're a property manager or third-party property manager, that work order might come to you in that format. And, you might not have the bandwidth to really sit down and try to dig into what was meant there or triage it or clean it up. So once you send that out to a vendor, that sort of sloppy data on the front end just follows through the full work order or the full life cycle of the work order. Like sometimes now your vendor out in the field has got an unclear idea of like what it is they're supposed to be addressing or fixing. And so it can break down in all of those areas. And we've seen it break down in all those areas for some of the operators we work with. But really, I think the intake is the most important piece, because if you've got good process and procedure around the intake, if you've got a systematic way that you like to categorize the work orders based on like what service vertical it is, now you've got a cleaner output for the pros out in the field. But also that's when you can start to use data and scorecards for vendors and like really start to manage the business. But it all starts with that stuff being kind of standardized on the front end of the intake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just to put a scale into perspective, how many work orders are you coordinating per year?
I think we did well over 100,000 last year. I know we did over 100,000 in 2024, so I'm probably selling us way short there on 2025. I need to get some updated data there. I don't know if Nate's sent it over to you, but yeah, in excess of 100,000 in 2024, continued to grow by about 70% year over year, and project the same again this year. And again, I just think that's a reflection of the product market fit. Like you said in the beginning, it is a third of the business for a lot of these owner operators and third-party property managers, and it's also just inherently the messiest because even if you're really good at maintenance, there are still work orders that just go wrong, frankly. Like that's how maintenance works. So, but yeah, we're doing it at scale. We've learned a lot of lessons, some because we were fortunate the technology we built addressed an issue in the right way. Others we've learned by mistake, trial and error, but we like to think we've got a fairly well-oiled machine today.
That's awesome. I mean, at that scale, 100,000 plus, this isn't repairs only. It's basically you're running a national operations business inside your portfolio. For a startup as well, it's amazing. So walk us through what actually happens when a property manager sends in a work order today with Lula.
Well, first, it can come to us in two different ways, and it depends on how we're working with the customer. Sometimes we actually handle the intake instead of a property manager sending it to us. The resident is submitting it through Lula's portal. And those will be for customers where we're operating really more like a managed service, which is to say, like, we are their maintenance arm. And so in that case, we handle all the front-end triage with our product Lumi, which uses AI to do all of the interaction. We also have a voice AI component where it can take calls and triage over the phone. And again, the benefit of that is we get structured data and a structured output from that, so that work order looks and feels the same every time to the vendors we're going to dispatch to. So we'll handle that piece on the front end. It also, if we're doing the intake, it allows us to handle scheduling right at that time, which is actually a crucially important part. When the work order is coming in, the resident is interacting with you. Like, that's the time to schedule, right? If the process is the work order's been entered and then they send it to us, now we reach out to the resident, that person might not be engaged anymore. And, sometimes it could take you 4 to 24 hours to get that scheduled, which is just a one-day delay that's unnecessary. But from our end, whether we've handled the intake or it comes to us through property management software like an AppFolio, for example, We will immediately reach out to the resident to do triage and de-escalation. So, we want to make sure we understand the work order. We're going to ask some clarifying questions. If we can get pictures, that's great. If it's a mechanical, we definitely want pictures so we can run that through one of our partner programs and get the age of the mechanicals, the likelihood of failure, those types of things before we dispatch if we don't need to. If we get through all those steps and we do need to dispatch, that's where Lula's a little bit different. We have our own vetted vendor network, and so it's a managed network. It's not just, hey, we give you access via email or a list of pros that you can use. No, we actually use our algorithm to dispatch to the Lula Pro network. These are pros that have raised their hand to be a part of Lula. We only accept about 15% of the applicants we get. We handle all the compliance, so we make sure that they're insured correctly, licensed correctly. We do the background checks. We put them through competency checks. And then, of course, there's ongoing check-ins as well, just to ensure that they're still fitting those criteria. So, yeah, we'll dispatch that using our algorithm to the top pro based on the service vertical in that area, based on experience, resident ratings on previous jobs, sometimes pricing. And then it'll go to them. And then those pros out in the field will use Lula Pro app out in the field. And so what that allows us to do is really the full check-in, check-out thing. So, we know when they're en route, we know how long they were on site. We can, validate that they've been doing the things that they said they were doing. Once they're finished with the job, they close it out. It comes into an internal QA process here. This is really our opportunity to look at the before and after pictures. We'll send a review to the resident so that the resident can tell us if the job wasn't done correctly as well. And then we'll close it out and we push all of that back into the property manager system of record. The real benefit here is we've built out integrations with almost all of the top property management software platforms in the market. And so as these statuses are being updated by our pros in the field, we can push real-time updates back into their system of record. So they don't have to swivel chair. They don't have to call Lula and ask what the status of a work order is. They can see when it's scheduled. They can see when we're en route. They can see the before and after pictures. Really everything is in there. So we say we manage the full life cycle of the work order from intake to invoice. And we do. The only difference for some customers might be how that intake occurs, whether it happens in their PMS system or whether we handle the intake.
Basically, a three-sided managed marketplace, effectively.
Yeah, which definitely layers in its own difficulties to manage and build out. But yes, that's effectively what we built.
Two-sided marketplace, no matter what, is already hard enough to manage. You have the chicken and the egg, and in your case, you have the chicken and the egg and the hen or whatever.
Right.
Let's talk about on the vendor side. You built a network of thousands of vendors across dozens of markets. You briefly mentioned now how you vet them and maintain quality, and yeah, I'm sure that's critical part of your business. But how do you maintain quality at that scale? And when you think about expanding, is that the first thing you do in new markets? It's like, okay, are they even providers here that are high quality? Because if there aren't, we know there are homes and there are people renting homes there, but if there aren't providers, we can't create them or train them fast enough, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mentioned earlier that, a lot of the things we've gotten right through iteration, and then we've also been lucky that we designed things correctly the first time. I think this is really one of them. I won't go into too much detail because I think there's a lot of proprietary information here, but
no, don't share any secrets.
We spent years in one market. We were just in Kansas City and we were crushing it here, but we were so afraid to take that leap. Because of your question, we're like, how do we do this how do we do it in Atlanta? Because I think that might have been the second market we went to, maybe it was Indianapolis. So we built out a process of how do we think we could do this while automating as much of it as possible? We will never be a heavy headcount company. One of our key mantras is solve with technology before people. And so we sat down and we're like, what could this look like if we automated it? And the process we built out then 6-7 years ago, however long that was the first time we went to a new market, is, I won't say largely unchanged, but it's very similar to what we do today. And so we're in 52 markets across the US today, but we can open a new market and deploy in 4 to 6 weeks, just using that same process. And so a lot of that front-end automation, I would say 80% of that process is automated before it gets to our provider success team. And then that's really the human layer where we want to do some of those interviews. We want to do the competency testing. At this point, they've already validated all of the, that they've got the insurance and the background check and all of those things. And so that's the team that really manages on the go forward. And you're right, though. Anybody who's in this business knows just because somebody's a good vendor today doesn't mean they're always going to be one. And so there has to be ongoing scoring. And really, that's the benefit. We had to make a decision way back when we had pros that said, well, we don't want to use your app in the field. And it's a two-sided marketplace, as you mentioned. So we're like, do we allow them to not use our app? Because we really need these pros, right? We've got jobs coming in and we don't have pros to service them. We held to our guns and said, like, no, if you're going to be on the Lula platform, you have to use our app in the field. And that has really been a saving grace for us. That's what allows us to have a managed network,
Hmm.
because now we have KPIs all day, every day on our pros and providers. So we know who we need to put on hold and coach, who we need to move off the network. We know in real time what gaps we might have in a particular service. Like, maybe the report shows that we need another plumber or two in Cincinnati, for example. Like, just having that real-time performance data has been critical to us to keep the managed network up and performing at a high level.
We're going to talk about AI soon, but I'm just thinking how you were doing all this stuff before AI, pretty much.
Yeah, it
And I'm
doesn't mean
sure
that we're
now,
automating it though. It's like,
right, right. No, to just goes to show that AI, it came to change everything and it will change everything, but people were successfully automating and vetting and, doing customer facing stuff at scale before AI as well. So,
yeah, well,
um,
that's like kind of like on what's next on the pro side is like, we figured out how to open a market in 4 to 6 weeks before we had these technology advances. And
right,
so
right.
like what's next on the pro side for us probably looks like, why only 52 markets instead of 250? Why 4 to 6 weeks instead of like, I don't know, 4 hours, 3 days? I don't know, but like, well, I think what's possible has changed so much, so rapidly, so quickly, that that's an exciting part of our business as well.
Absolutely. If I understand correctly, your pricing model, you offer a flat rate pricing across things like HVAC and appliances. Walk us through that and what, by making maintenance predictable in this case, what actually changes for the operator.
Yes. So it became evident to us early on that, particularly in the owner operator portion of this space, like there was an appetite for everything to be flat rate priced. The problem with this is, anybody that's on the operator side, they can build out a price sheet that's as long and deep as you want, but operationalizing it at scale is really difficult because you have to have headcount. A work order is not like described in one way on your flat rate sheet. It's not necessarily described in the same way on the invoice. So you need a lot of people to tie that back to the flat rate sheet. You need a lot of people to catch that the pricing's not right. Like, it's just not really scalable from an operational side on the client side. But it was evident to us that there was a real appetite for it. And so this is actually a good opportunity for us to tease this. So in addition to the things you mentioned, which we'll talk about in just a second, we are actually launching silently here over the next few weeks about 650 standardized flat rate prices for handyman jobs. So effectively, every handyman job we do will be flat rates and predictable pricing for our customers going forward. We're super excited to announce that. This isn't the official announcement for that, but like, I don't mind teasing it. That we're testing it on the back end and it's looking good. But the way that we do this, and people ask all the time, well, how do you guys figure it out? And there's really a few variables here. There's your parts, there's the labor side, right? And then obviously we have to make money somehow on the work order. And so what we're basically doing is just looking at averages and medians and saying like, hey, where is a number where we can give our customer a predictable price? And we might win some, we might lose some, but overall, it's going to end up in a wash where we were making what we need to make. The customer is getting a really, really competitive price and a predictable price. And I think that's what the market wants. I think, I more than think, I know over the next year, we'll have additional announcements that will be really powerful on the flat rate side. I think they'll be industry changing in some ways as well. But for today, those prices we have, and any customer that reaches out to us, we're always open to sharing them. Like, they are best in market prices. When we show those to customers, it's not like they're like, yeah, that price is okay, but I like the fact that it's consistent. It's usually like, that's a great price, and I like the fact that it's consistent. So they've been really, really popular with our customers.
Turning maintenance from a surprise or unpredictable expense into something that you can actually underwrite or, predict, that's tangible. That changes things.
As we see, future iterations of these programs that we're building, and, we've got some additional ideas around that stuff already. You're right. I don't think it's overselling it to say some of that could change the industry. And I know that this is what the operators in the space want. Like, they want to be able to know and predict what maybe it's going to cost ahead of time and make it a line item where it's budgeted and they feel pretty comfortable that that's what it's going to be.
And thank you for that breaking news slash soft launch.
Of
Tangent
course.
listeners will appreciate it. Let's see. So, in terms of your sweet spot, who are you working with today? You mentioned third-party managers, owner-operators, mom and pops, institutional. Who are you working with today? Who is your ideal customer?
There's obviously not a lot of people in this space that do what we do. So when we started out, we were a young company. I don't think we really even realized that some of those competitors were competitors. Like, we were just focused on how do we make Lula a company. And so in the beginning, we focused really strongly on what we call regional accounts. I think it was kind of the NARPM crowd, 400 door third party property manager in Atlanta or in Sacramento, right? When you work with customers like that, you have to be a little bit flexible in how you work with them. And so we actually learned a lot in that space. And what we found was we started to see, as people kind of came across us and heard our name, a natural pull upstream. So it's a little bit of a tricky question to answer. We've got around 250 customers across the US today, which for a SaaS company doesn't sound like a lot. For a company that's providing services on the maintenance side, like, I think that's a lot of customers. The majority of those customers are, I would say, regional in nature. We also have a lot of larger customers where we do a lot of revenue with them, right? Which is kind of a natural. Like, if you look at the distribution number of customers, it's skewed towards the regional accounts. Revenue customers maybe skewed a little more upstream. We have found we do a lot of work in that sort of mid-tier with the owner operators. So think of those funds and asset managers that are, between 2 and 10,000 doors. They own their own properties. They've got kind of a light operation when it comes to headcount. They have some people that know what they're doing, but they're looking for a partner to effectively outsource maintenance, right? So they want us to be their maintenance arm. They want us to be a managed service to sort of take care of that piece for them. And I think we really found a really strong like product market fit with those customers. One of the things that I like most about those customers is that they, from the beginning of the engagement, they view us as a partner and not a vendor. And so we've actually been able to iterate some really cool product improvements from them. Instead of them being upset about how something went, they're like, hey, what we'd love for you guys to do is you should have this as a flat rate. You should do flat rate roofing. And so we said, okay, tell us how we should price that, and kind of built that out with our partners. And we get a lot of product enhancements out of those partnerships as well. So not to not answer the question about ICP, we've always thought that we kind of have two, which is larger scale owner operators and then some of these third party PMs as well.
That builds so much goodwill, and design partner determining your roadmap together, like you build for them. I think that makes a whole difference. You mentioned before briefly Appfolio. Talk about integrations and how important it is, or how have you been prioritizing integrating with PMSs or other systems that your clients use?
I mean, we'll integrate with any partner that makes sense. If we've got, a large number of customers or prospective customers, we've also done custom integrations with some of the larger owner operators where, maybe they have their own, usually a Salesforce-based platform of some kind. I think one of the things people probably don't realize about Lula is that half of our employees on our engineering and dev team. So like a lot of people say they're a tech company, like whether people think of us in that way or not, like we very much are, just based on the the distribution of our employees. Appfolio was the first integration we did. We came to a realization a few years ago. We have a customer portal, and we would present it and do a demo to any customer we onboarded. And the feedback was like, this is great, but as you can imagine, people don't want a swivel chair. They don't want another software platform they have to have open on their browser, or however they might access it. And at the same time, we knew that visibility is like the most critical part for any of these customers that are sending us work orders when, whether it's somebody within their org, if they're an owner operator, or if it's the asset owner, if it's a third party PM, when that person asks you like, hey, what's the status of this work order at this address? You want to be able to give an answer, right? And so that's when we kind of had this aha moment. We hounded Appfolio for a long time to get them to let us into the Stack marketplace. Once they finally agreed to let us in, we built out that integration quickly, and it was immediately successful. Just based on their footprint in the market, I think some 60% of our customers at that time, when we finished that integration, were Appfolio customers. We've kind of made our way through the industry from there. Of course, we integrate with, Ripvine, Rip Manager, Property Meld. We've got ERD integration. I know I'm missing a few here, and hopefully my partner, who's our head of partnerships, who's located right over here, doesn't get upset if I forget a few of them. But if we've got a customer that's interacting with us at a significant level, we want them to have an integration, because we know the more visibility they have into the work order, the more confidence they're going to have in Lula's ability to perform, right? It's only that unknown that makes people uneasy, but when they can see it, they're comfortable that we're doing it the right way.
Critical. That visibility builds trust, and ongoing, that you can report what's going on, the latest. I think that makes a whole difference, especially when they're used to not having visibility into some of these things. Oh, did the vendor make it? Did they solve it?
I'll give a quick plug to our chief data officer, as well as our product team. We did just launch a new product enhancement that we call Ask Lula. And, you talk about leveraging AI. This is a pretty simple way to leverage AI, but it's funny, everybody sees what AI can do, and then we show it to them and they're just blown away. And Really what it is it touches every data point within our database on a work order level. And so you can ask Lula, hey, what's the status of this work order? And it'll tell you the status of the work order. But I think where people get really impressed, so it'll tell you, it was dispatched on this date, pro arrived at this date on this time, pro closed it out on this date at this time. You can access your pictures. But where people get really impressed is when you ask follow-up questions like, okay, well, how far was the breaker from the door? Or what color was the carpet that was put down? Like these types of questions, we have access to that information too. And so it really allows them to like self-service in real time all of the information they might want to otherwise or might have to otherwise reach out to Lula or go searching in their PMS for. And to me, that's a game changer because when their boss or their asset owners reaching out to them with questions, it's like they can ask those questions in real time and get answers. So it's thus far the feedback has been pretty amazing on that product. And again, it feels like a reasonably basic way to deploy AI, but there was such a want and desire for it from our customers that it's been super popular.
Where has AI actually earned its keep so far in maintenance? I mean, you briefly mentioned a couple, but it seems like an area where AI is ideal. So at least the intake or the customer facing part. Just curious, where have you adopted AI since you were a company that were already born and successful before AI? How have you integrated? How do you see it impacting maintenance overall?
Yeah, we see it a lot with our services team, which is, really where we're acting as maintenance coordinators on these work orders. And so they're the ones who are really watching those work orders through the process, at least the ones that don't go happy path, which is to say all the way through our system to completion without any human intervention at all. We love those. We focus a lot on making sure that number continues to grow. But as far as AI, yeah, I think there are some obvious ones, whether you're talking about maintenance or any other area, which is like menial tasks, right? Repetitive tasks, those types of things. And so, we've been able to use AI to help us like customize customer rule sets. So, maybe it's around resident responsibility or preferred vendors or different things when we onboard customers, flagging that information and serving it up to our services team to make sure that we're interacting with the work order in the way that the customer wants us to interact. Obviously, with the launch of our Lumi product, we're using it on the intake side. We also use Lumi internally for work order intake. And that's an easy one, just to be able to do the triage and de-escalation, with the resident in real time. And the voice AI piece of it as well is really cool. We've been able to use that, even implement a little bit of hospitality. I've listened in on some of the calls that we've done with customers there, and to hear the voice intake, be able to say like, oh, congratulations on your new home, or let's get this worked out for you so you can get to work on time. Like, just things that you would try to train your staff to do is really cool. So intake's an easy one, I think. Another bottleneck for a lot of companies, and it could be for us too, is really around the invoicing piece when you're processing work orders at the end. There's got to be a layer of oversight there to make sure that the work was done correctly. But we can also agree that some of these things are, like I said, happy path, which is to say like, hey, if that work order was at a price that our data says is fair, it was under the NTE, it has before and after pictures, and it's from a trusted pro, I don't need to spend a lot of time looking at that because 99% of the time, the answer to that is it's good to go. Let's process it through the queue so we can focus on the ones where we have more questions. And then really for us internally, this is a services time saver, which is just using voice AI for some of the more repetitive things that we get, rescheduling calls if we need to reach out, basic questions through like that Ask Lula function I mentioned before. We can use voice AI to do that as well. So we've deployed it both externally within our products. We'll see more of that once we kind of fully launch the Foresight product, which has a lot of cool AI features in it. But we've also used it a lot internally. Like I said, one of the things that's most important to us as a company is using technology first to solve problems instead of just throwing additional headcount at it. And we were really fortunate early on that one of the first C-level hires we made was a chief data officer. Before we even had a CTO or a COO, really, I was playing that role, which is, not the role that I would be in full time normally. And so we knew how important data was going to be in this space. And he's really kind of taken the lead within our organization as, how do we deploy AI in meaningful ways? And then we've got a lot of stuff in pipeline that we're really, really excited about that I think is really going to change the way we're able to service our customers, but also the way our customers interact with us.
So according to our friends at Appfolio, AI adoption among property managers jumped from 21% to 34% in the last year. That's a third of them. That's quite significant, especially for a cohort that isn't. I wouldn't say it's laggards when it comes to tech adoption. It depends who you ask, but definitely not early adopters. By definition, right? You don't want to break things. You don't want to disrupt entire properties or entire portfolios. But yeah, that is a significant jump. So how?
I think. Sorry, go ahead. I
No,
was going to
please.
say, so much of our space is taken up by what you would normally consider like SMBs, small businesses, right? And so
Mm.
I think they get beaten up a little bit about tech adoption, but that's also the nature of small businesses sometimes, which is, sometimes they struggle with process and procedure and operations. And I think adopting AI is largely the same, which is to say, I'm certain the overwhelming majority of the industry is open to adopting AI if it means they can operate better or more efficiently. It's just tough to do if you don't already have the process and procedure button down on the back end. Is just kind of my take on it. I think they're open to it. It's more of it's easier said than done in some cases.
Taking this to the, not to the end goal, but the end game in terms of where we're going with AI and robotics and humanoids or task specific robots, which I think is going to be more likely what we get in practice soon enough. Is this where you see Lula going in 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think with, recent advances in AI, I don't think any of us can say what it's gonna look like in 5 years. So that timeline just gets a lot shorter for us. But the ideal state of where we would go, which is maybe unattainable, is 100% happy path on a work order. Today, I think we do
Happy
something
Path
around
is fully managed.
it just happy path is we don't touch it. Our
Okay.
technology takes it all the way from intake to invoice. I think we do around 50, somewhere between 50 and 60% are defined as that today, which feels like a good number. I don't know that there's any industry standard there, right? If it was like, what does it look like in an ideal state 5 years from now? I think it would be that it's all automated and that we're getting the same output, which is successful solutions. We've got the same ratings from the residents, which is around 4.8 out of 5 usually. Like if everything goes smoothly and there really aren't human touch points, that's sort of like the perfect solution to me. Now, I don't know that 100% is ever really attainable, right? It's maintenance. Like there's always going to be that 1 or 2% that just tend to be a little messy and really need sort of some human interaction there. But yeah, I think that's where we'll be. We also are working really hard, when I mentioned Foresight earlier, to put the same tools that we use within Lula in the hands of our customers so that maybe it's not us that they have managed it all. Maybe we give them the tools and they manage it themselves, but it's still utilizing the same technology that we use. It's still using AI to your advantage in a way that's already been sort of shaped and formed from our learnings for you, as opposed to you having to figure it out.
Industry standards when it comes to outsourcing maintenance. I mean, what kind of ROI do you promise, or if at all, when talking to a new customer that they want to outsource it, they've been doing it themselves? I'm sure you'll be able to do it better, faster, more affordably. But like, how do you think about ROI, or does that question even come up at all, or they're just happy that someone with experience is taking maintenance away from their plate?
The way that you ask that question tells me a part of the answer there, which is largely they're just wanting somebody that they know as a professional that focuses on maintenance to take it off their plate. So I think for a long time in this business, there was a feeling, particularly among third-party property managers, of like, that's what the asset owner pays me for, is to figure maintenance out. And our take early on was like, right. And the way that you figure it out is by letting us handle it because we're pros at it. And so that actually seems to be something that is more commonly held belief amongst that customer base now than it was 3 or 4 years ago, which is like just rebooting the same way of doing things, hiring a vendor manager, bringing on our own vendor list, trying to figure out scorecards if we're that savvy, having a maintenance coordinator sit over the top of all these work orders. I think people are recognizing like that if there's a company like Lula that just says like, our entire focus is on maintenance. It's on getting the work order from intake to invoice through that life cycle. I'm going to let them do that. And I think the biggest thing for us is earlier you mentioned the flat rate catalog. There's a perception among people that's like, okay, well, you're just an aggregator. So you're just taking the same vendors I get, and then you're just adding a top up on top of it. So you're more expensive. And I think they're starting to come around and realize that that's not the case. Like we don't get the same price that they get. We've got such bargaining power with these vendors because of how many work orders we can feed them that
Right.
we really get to negotiate those labor rates down. Now we get buying power on products, right? Supply. So like, our HVAC, the reason we have such great flat rate pricing there is because we also get really great prices on the equipment. We're just able to put together a more compelling price for the customers as well. And so there was never really a question about providing a better service experience for the owners and the residents. It was, I think, really early on, it was the price. And the flat rate catalog has really gotten rid of that objection at all, because if a customer asks us about the price now, we can just show them the catalog. Like, that's our price, right? And if they agree that that's a great price, then we're in agreement. The price isn't an issue. So I think it really is allowed, like taking that off their plate, showing performance numbers that shows like we are actually providing like meaningful benefit on the maintenance side. And once they see that and have comfort that we're a good partner, it really allows them to focus on like just higher impact things within their business. And they all want to grow door count. They just get so distracted with something like maintenance where there are just so many touch points throughout the day that I think it makes us a good partner. And we're fortunate to be where we've been, but over the last 12 months with some of these customers, we're really starting to see traction and like feel real partnership, if that makes sense.
I say this often, but this is truly the unsexy part of owning and operating properties that the owner and the operator doesn't want to deal with. By definition, like they'd probably rather deal with it with anything else.
It's the same for us, Edward. There's nothing like meeting somebody new who asks what you do. And if you just say, well, I founded a technology company based in Overland Park. And usually that's enough to get through the conversation, but they might say, what's your technology do? And I feel like the second I say maintenance, if they're not from an industry that deals with maintenance, like it's just, the eyes are glossy. They're like, okay.
I give peace of mind. You can sleep at night. You're welcome.
That's a much better way to describe it. Yes.
That's as simple as that. Do you implement any hardware? Software is nice and everything, but for like very specific issues or recurring issues, water leaks or other kind of stuff, have you looked into hardware, sensors, or other type of technology to help you
Yes,
assess?
so we don't utilize that today. We do have, I would say, recently started ongoing partnership conversations with some different companies around, like just as you're mentioning, leaks, sensors, things of that nature, how we can integrate those into the Foresight software platform once we start selling that into the market. Internally, we don't, but again, it's kind of an interesting business because we've got, this software product that we're taking to market, but also we utilize that technology internally to manage these work orders. And so it's almost like anything that we envision as being a benefit for a Foresight customer is inherently a benefit for Lula's customers as well. So yeah, today we don't. I don't have anything great to give you on that front, but it is something where we recognize like, hey, as we look forward to what's next for the rest of this year, next year, we have looked and talked about different things that we could do.
For an operator listening now, where do you see operators fail when adopting systems like Lula?
I think there's a natural tendency for people to try to own everything on the build side. So even for the folks that are upstream a little bit and a little more savvy from an organizational perspective, there's still an appetite to build everything themselves. And sometimes that works. We do interact with some folks that have done a good job there. That's why we integrate into those platforms to make sure, like, we feel like we've got a pretty good idea of how maintenance works at this point and what they're going to want to see. And usually when we show them what kind of KPIs we track and what kind of data we have, they're very much open into integrating with us so we can feed as much in as possible. Get into like less savvy organizations, like you really have to have standardization and optimized platforms and processes in those companies before you can really implement another company, unless you're just handing everything over to them. Like if it's something like Lula where you're just going to say, take all of my maintenance, we can usually provide a roadmap of like how we should interact with you that works pretty well. But if it's an organization or a company where that's just hasn't reached any kind of operational efficiency yet, I think those are companies that can be tough to work with. And they're well intended as well, right? It's just that when you don't have those processes and procedures in place, it just makes it difficult. As far as Lula specifically, it's almost like mindset is where the difference is. If people view us as a vendor and have kind of a traditional mindset with the vendor, those are the relationships where it's like, you do 1,000 work orders and you do great. You're 4.8 out of 5 stars. And then you mess up one plumbing work order and they're like, well, we're not using you anymore. And when they have a partnership mindset, which is like the things you and I have been talking about, like, hey, maintenance is a real headache. Me spending time focused on that is not what's best for moving my business forward. It's not what's best for scaling my business. Then we can work together and build together. And so I think it's almost like of those things that I mentioned, whether it's like having things buttoned up operationally versus just having the right mindset of partnership. The mindset of partnership makes almost everything go smoothly, honestly.
Great points there and great mindset. Crucial to set expectations accordingly and, just set up for success, regardless if there are bumps on the road, because there will be bumps on the road. Last but not least, collaboration superpower. If you could choose one person, historic or living, to do a partnership with besides Bo, who would it be?
Yeah, I hate to cop out here. I'm sure that this is one that everybody says, but I would have to go with 80s TV icon MacGyver. Like, I don't know what we're collaborating on here, but I know that guy's going to figure it out. If I recall, there are at least two things he needs every time. One of them's gum, and one of them's like anything else. And from there, he can pretty much get you out of any situation. So that feels like an obvious answer. Sorry if you've gotten that one multiple times before.
That's the first time. It's not a cop out. He's also known as MacGyver in Spanish.
There you go.
And
See,
he's
world renowned.
Exactly. He's world renowned. Very underappreciated, and maybe someone should have chosen him before to do a partnership with. But I think that's perfect for you and the Lula team. Will, where can Tangent listeners learn more about Lula and connect with you?
Yes, they can learn more about Lula at our website, www.lula.life. And of course, we're very active on LinkedIn. Any listeners who want to connect with me there can find me under Will Parrish.
Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today and sharing your background, your exciting company, and your experience with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was a great conversation, and look forward to seeing you again.
Muchas gracias. If you learned something new or enjoyed the conversation, text a friend the link to this episode right now. You can find links, resources, and ways to connect with us in the show notes.